All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. Today, we will be hearing from some of our award-winning members about what will happen with this year's awards program, and give you some helpful tips for entering this awards program and others. My name is Becky Magdaleno. I'm your CEO here at AI Florida, and what we'll be covering today is we'll be talking about the framework for design excellence, how to incorporate it into your awards and changes for 2026 and how to register for this year's awards. We are in webinar mode, so you are all in listen only. We will have a question and answer session at the end, so please hold your questions. We will be able to unmute people if you do like to ask your question and not just put it in the comment box, but you can put your questions in the Q&A box or the chat box. This is being recorded, so we will share it for later. And with that, I'd like everybody to go ahead and introduce themselves. I'll start with Jeff because you're in that corner on my screen.
Hi, yes. I'm Jeff Huber. I'm a principal with Brooks Scarpa Huber Architects in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, as well as a professor of architecture at Florida Atlantic University. Thank you for having me.
Philip?
Hi, I'm Philip Donovan. I'm an architect at Little Diversified Architectural Consulting in Orlando. I'm a partner here, and I'm also an adjunct at the University of Florida.
And Joyce?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Joyce Owens. I am principal at Architecture Joyce Owens and head of Studio AJO, our interior design department at the office. I have been with AIA for a long time in the role as president. I've gone to national. I've done quite a lot of volunteer work with AIA, and I know a lot of the backstory, which is, I'm hoping, what all of us will bring to you today about how you can make your award submissions better.
All right. And with that, let me get our screen up and going. And Joyce, you will be our first person to start. So let me get to your slide. All right.
Yeah. So I'd just like to start out by explaining. Becky's going to tell you more about how the Design Award submissions are changing this year. And the request has come from the board and from members to include the AIA Climate Action Plan and Design Excellence criteria that AIA is using for their awards. So what I've learned over the years is many of you don't even know what that is or what we're talking about. So before Becky can tell you about how we're going to put it in, I'd just like to give you a little bit of background about what that action plan is and how it came about. So when I was on Strategic Council in 2019, the climate plan was launched. And it was actually many years in the making and was a result of a lot of COAT research that was done in probably the last 5 or 10 years before that. And it really was the idea of using the power of the design to further the responsibilities of the architect. So no longer were we just had AIA was promoting us as having a traditional role of the responsibility of health, safety, and welfare, but it expanded our role to address climate extremes and social inequity as well through the power of design. So what is that? And what did they do? They put together, so that was the idea of what they were going to do. And then the result was the AIA framework for design excellence. They defined 10 principles that would guide design excellence, and it would inform the progress of a building towards zero carbon, healthy, just, resilient, and equitable built environment. And it applied to every architect and to every project is the idea. So this is for all members to be able to use this guideline to think about how they could make their buildings better. And it wasn't designed at first regarding for an award reason. It was designed to help architects understand how they could make their buildings better. So I have been a juror at the World Architecture Festival for many years now. And I noticed the difference between what I saw at my local level, at AIA Florida level, is there wasn't the expectation to include information about these topics, about healthy buildings, resiliency, dealing with the environment, or the data that would support those things. And when I would be a juror at the World Architecture Festival, architects come from all over the world and they present. And it was amazing how much clearer their design awards were. So I know that AIA National has incorporated these 10 design principles into their awards 5 years ago at least. And it is helping the jury to decide who should get the buildings based not just on pretty pictures, but actually how the building, the why behind the building and what makes it unique and what makes it special and how does it contribute to our environment. So the 4 areas that they chose, I'm just going to go through them slightly, a little bit information. Zero carbon refers to reducing the climate impact by making the new buildings or renovations carbon neutral and considering both the operational and the embodied carbon of the building itself. The equitable side of this is to allow buildings to be inclusive so that they could invite all kinds of people into the building so that every building was a welcoming building for everyone. It created accessible and safe places that address, historic injustices and support communities that had been underrepresented over the years as well. Obviously, resiliency became a big part of that. And these buildings are being asked to be designed to withstand climate extremes. And who better than us in Florida to be addressing that topic, because we know better than anyone in the country about what that means to, after all the hurricanes we've been dealing with. So, and then how do you protect the occupants during storms or extreme events? And then as well as that, how the building can recover quickly. The final thing they talked about as their goal is the health of the building and how do you protect the people inside the building and how do you protect the ecosystems and now and for future generations. So all of these items are kind of general topics that they decided that they would focus on to create the 10 principles. So the 10 principles, if we go to the next slide, Becky. There's a QR code on the right side of the slide here. And there's a really good website on AIA National. This is just the very beginning of it that I've given you a picture here. And it tells you each item and how you can address the topic. So if you're designing for integration, it gives you a quick summary here. But when you click on the link there, it will take you to a whole page about designing for integration, including it asks questions about how can your building actually respond to this item? So it's like, again, this has not been put together for the awards. It's been put together so we as architects can learn to design better buildings that respond to our climate and our community better. So it's a great site. They've done a really good job. It's been up. I don't think they've changed it for 5 or 6 years since they launched it. But there's so much information here. And I might even suggest sometime instead of, scrolling through your Instagram account, maybe you could scroll through this and just kind of get a good idea and a good feel for how we can each make our buildings better. So the 10 principles, I'll go through them very briefly. I really suggest that you take a look at this website, are designing for integration, design for equitable communities, design for ecosystem, design for water, design for economy, design for energy, design for well-being, design for resources, design for change, and design for discovery. So this is a good guide about how we're going to work on our own buildings, but we also want to use this framework in our design awards now. And so we're going to talk about how the changes are going to happen to the format of how we're going to put our design awards together and how we would like all entrants to include these ideas. The jury really appreciates it when you do this, and because it makes it easier to understand the why behind your building. And so Philip's gonna come show us a building because his building was his submittal was called out by the jurors this past year for actually implementing this framework into his submission. So I'd like to turn it over to Philip so that he can show us a good example of how this might be done.
Thanks, Joyce. I'm gonna share my screen. I just wanted to also note, if people were paying attention, Joyce mentioned that this framework is not for awards.
It's not.
It is for great design that gives back more than it takes. Something that our industry needs to focus more on. Can everybody see can you, Joyce and Jeff, see my
Yeah.
screen? Okay, good. And to that end, if you do focus on these things during the design, getting it through construction and then operations, it's really, really easy to submit for awards and award-winning projects. They're hard to ignore. So this was our PowerPoint actually for the AIA Florida Design Awards. This is the Four Roots Farm Campus. Of course, it's not labeled as part of the award submission, but it is a carbon neutral education center. This is well, let's just walk through it. So what we did was we used the Framework for Design Excellence as a guide, one of several different guides throughout the design of this project, knowing that there are other, the framework is not a certification, but it is a framework to create better design and to get it into operations and make sure those operations last in with longevity, and that it performs the way you designed it to. But there's other certifications that are allied with that that help support that and actually prove out the metrics. And so this is a 7,000 square foot education building. If any of you are familiar with Orlando, right here is downtown, I-4 and 408. So this is in the packing district. It's part of the Four Roots Farm campus. If anybody's heard of Four Rivers Barbecue, that gentleman who started that, this is his philanthropic side, dealing with the waste opportunity. So this presentation framed the opportunity. This is meant to deal with food health in the community, the regenerative urban farm campus. It sits at the nexus of two very disparate communities, College Park and Pine Hills over here to the west. And so how do they start addressing food inequity in the community? How do they start addressing food waste? And how do the buildings and the campus start to reflect those values? And when we did address that, we're finding that we're starting to address components of the Framework for Design Excellence. And so we used the content that we created throughout the design process and then started to tie it to the design framework. So you will see all 10 of these show up in this presentation. I'm not going to linger very long on any page, but we actually had to address, and a lot of this text was pulled from the design content, either books throughout the design process, content that we created with the owner, feedback we were getting through the operations. It's been in operations for about a year now, but we found it very easy once we moved into the awards. We had the content ready, and it was built during the design process, not added back in after, trying to address these things. So this is a 4-classroom education building. It's a mass timber project. So we had a lot of opportunity here. It's also following a living building challenge. So we designed it to meet the energy pedal of the living building challenge. So it had to be net positive energy. We wanted to reduce its water use. So there's four 1,000 gallon cisterns that collect all the rainwater and use them to flush toilets. So again, photography was there. We were just using it to tell the story. So designed for water, it's 76% reduction in potable water use. We had diagrams that start to very easily orient the jury, but more importantly, it starts to orient clients who aren't always speaking the language that we speak as architects. These are graphics that the broader public can get into and understand very easily. And then we filter through it with more discussion and commentary on what's going on with building systems that support each piece of the framework. So designed for resources, like I said, it's mass timber. building, which was really low embodied carbon. We're actually pursuing carbon neutrality with Living Building Challenge now on this, but also eliminating red list chemicals. So as we start to build the AIA award deck, we want to make sure that we're highlighting things because they're looking at a lot of stuff, a lot of projects as they filter through all of these, and then letting the photography speak for themselves. So design for well-being, removing CO2, healthier daylighting, smart strategies, and I'm just going to keep flipping through integration. So how do we integrate into place? How do we integrate into what was once a dump and is now mostly a wet site? It's beneath the flood elevation. So we had to address that. So integrating into a site that was very difficult to do so. Design for economy. How do we start to save resources, cost up front, but long-term operating costs? How does that start to become powerful in the narrative? Discovery. So how does it orient visitors to the natural world around them, the mission of the client, but also what this building is doing for them and for the larger good. Equitable communities, we talked a lot about. This is dealing with food inequity. There's a 15,000 acre greenhouse. So starting to tap into these stories as we work through. And we actually just took the icons from the framework to make it really clear. This is what we're addressing on each one. And then having diagrams that support all of these things. Designing for energy. Living Building Challenge says you have to hit 105% of your energy needs. So that's not just putting PV on it. So starting to tell that story. We don't often see pictures of building envelope testing, but it's really important. We did that. We made sure the building operated as it was meant to. This is part, I will mention that we submitted for a North Carolina Coat Award, and then we're in it's submitted for a National Code Award. And so that's a very, very extensive process of actually proving out the metrics. So what we did here was we took and made them accessible pictures, but there's a spreadsheet with all the quantified data on how we got there. So we looked at daylight studies on the floor plans, glare studies, making sure that everybody understood that we measured these things. We didn't just say this building performs, we proved it out. We had carbon measurements, so baseline versus reduction, EUI measurements. Again, we energy modeled it. It's really hard to look at an energy model graphically. So how do we start to represent these things to address the framework and also show the data and then how it's operating, and then design for change. This was actually a really powerful one. We knew this building was within the floodplain. We tried our best to elevate it and build in mitigation strategies. I won't go through all those, but last year we were tested right after we opened it. Florida, as you all know, Milton came over and slammed into us overnight. So this was 1 week before Milton. This was the morning after Milton. Early morning, contractor was out on site. The building utilities were elevated. The site was elevated. We actually got to prove out the resiliency strategies here. And then 2 days later, it was like nothing had happened on site. So how do we keep people getting back into place, making sure they're not spending 6 weeks or 6 months rebuilding, but designing for resiliency? So letting the building and the photographs and the design prove it out. And then we left with a hero image of what's happening here on campus. So we didn't have extensive data, but we did try to address in very concise narrative how we met the framework and let the pictures and the images and the graphics start to fill in the blanks between the narrative and the final pictures. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff to take us through a more in-depth look at the process for getting here. I'll stop.
Thank you, Philip. All right, let me share my screen. All right, I think everybody can see this. So yeah, what I wanted to just go over was a few best practices in awards. And I think the common thread here that Joyce and Philip and all of us are talking about is a clear organization and framework. I think one of the things that we've identified is that we're moving away from a kind of wow factor to a why factor. And jurors are asking, why does this project exist? What problems are they trying to solve? And why does this matter and why does it matter now? And I think that's something that we need to begin to imagine and envision and tell the story about those exact factors. One of the things that we see and cannot press enough, and in fact, as we were preparing and organizing for this webinar, I mean, we all kind of come to one conclusion, and that photography is the first jury member. It's so critically important to have photography because it's the interpretation. It's not just documentation of your projects, but it's the interpretation. So we always hire professional photographers whenever possible. We also photograph things ourselves, but we hire professional photographers because they're going to see things in a different way. They're going to interpret it in a different way. And it's actually kind of how our users are interpreting it and seeing our buildings in different ways. So we didn't want this to be in a kind of silo of thinking, but we also want to show context, use, scale, and atmosphere through the photography that we're looking at, and sequencing of the or images with intentionality. So, as Philip was just showing you, they ended on a hero image, but in some cases, I think he also started on a hero image, but you're building out context, you're building out the experience, you're also building out details, or in this case of the framework for design excellence, how do we tie that? And that's, I think, an important factor because the framework for design excellence does move us from that kind of wow to that why, and our photography should just align to that. And to this point, I just threw this slide on here because I wanted you to see, the bottom left-hand image is actually an image we took or I took with my iPhone on the site. I mean, it's not a professional camera, but we hired a professional photographer, Mark Herboth, who came out and photographed DC Alexander Park, the particular example you see here. And that was one of the images he came with that we're showing in the center. And I just want to show the value of the photography is that this can be published anywhere. And in this case, this photograph got published on the cover of Arc Record back in June of last year. And so it was really exciting for us. But again, we always see the photographer's photography being the things that are of high enough quality that go ahead and get into the publications. And just tying this also and when we're thinking about photography, but also videography, it's how is this going to play out on our social media? How is it going to play out in websites? How is it going to play out in publishing or in hard copy forms? We're thinking through all this. And so there's just some of these examples that are just showing the social media, web, and publishing here and why that photography becomes so critical because it is the brand that is going across all these platforms, not just in your award submissions, but you can really leverage this to be something that helps you from a marketing, from a business development standpoint. And so when we look at preparing winning project submissions, we're really looking at that from photography to then storytelling. And so how do we look at storytelling in the awards, publications, and exhibitions? They all start the same way for us. So strong projects fail when the story is unclear. And I think that's something that is, again, a model for us to understand is how to create a narrative, a storyline, and cultivate that storyline through the projects. So this is, again, why we invest in photography, why we invest in videos, and the equipment to do that. Even in our own office, we do have professional cameras, we have professional drones, but we also hire professionals to do that as well. And so really creating an ecosystem across the board of videography, of photography is something that is essential for us. And so our role or your role in these projects is to really orient the jury, the public, your clients, and your business development plan towards that one shared goal, communicating the value through storytelling of your projects. And so as we prepare stories through this, we do, again, create across platforms, web, print, and our submissions. And so I just wanted to kind of show you a few examples here because we also make social media reels.
The idea that the building is a vitrine to the city and becomes a display for art and cultural activities across the city of Hollywood was something that was critical.
So they're short little reels, but they're important and provocative.
The rents now in Miami Beach are somewhere around $5,000 for a one-bedroom apartment, and that's pretty out of most people's range, especially for a demographic like elderly that are on fixed incomes. our average rent is about $300 a month to $900 a month.
And so these reels can become really important for us to, again, convey and communicate just really quick 20-second, 30-second videos. And then we also invest in larger, longer videos and that are more the traditional form. And I'm just going to play one of those real quick of our recent project and one of the winners from last year's AI Florida Design Awards, the DC Alexander Park.
The city asked for this Instagram moment. I don't think there's a single square line or straight line in this project. The concept is a oval-shaped spiral that moves around with the landscape and the playground in the center. One of the critical aspects of this project was reinventing nature. This was a former parking lot that was converted into restoring the natural ecosystems of the areas. In the last year, this project has seen over 1 million visitors. One of the best stories that I have is the day it opened. There was a mother and a young child that were attending it. The kid runs up to me and just says, "This is the coolest park ever," as he runs off and keeps running over the dunes and over the walls. It was just an amazing moment that really showcases, why we do these projects.
So, again, those videos just, kind of help us, really capitalize and kind of narrow down what is the focus, what is the story. And they're always about one or two elements. And then obviously, even within our broader portfolios, when we're submitting into the awards, that's the one issue. The awards submissions do become, these photographic based. They're not video based. You can't upload videos, at least not yet, I don't think. But hopefully that's something in the future, because I think that is where the experience and the storytelling can really kind of drive when you can get into videography. But I wanted to touch on one last thing, which is file organization and how we at Brooks Scarpa Huber kind of do this. It's really gives us a competitive advantage because it makes it easy for us to organize any submission, whether it be marketing, business development, materials for publication, for exhibition, but even the design awards. It's all a factor in this. And so we typically see a project folder. We organize it outside the actual project in a design archive. And so we have a fact sheet, we have project narratives, we have the photography, we have drawings and diagrams, videos, press and awards that we all track for every single project. That really helps us, again, narrow this down. And so I just want to kind of talk about that for a second. In the top left-hand corner, we're on a cloud-based server now, but our server allows us to organize, and what you can see or maybe not see because of the size of these, but here's that archived project images folder. And so each one of our projects will have these. Inside those, we have all of that different content. But what's critical is we always have this kind of project description. One of the things that's always a issue for us is when we're developing a portfolio or we're developing a proposal for submitting to an RFP. Folks that are working with us, especially marketing or business development, are always asking the same questions. So we were able to kind of jumpstart that by just creating these standard project cut sheets that just had all of the information, whether it's the project owner, the client, the square footage, the costs, the awards, everything is tracked, as well as giving a brief description and a long description in these awards or in these project folders. And so it's something that we can always extract and bring to our social media within those proposals and so on and so forth. And so even in these, we also have the kind of image folders, and that's where we're organizing all of these images. But I want to kind of point out this top right-hand one, because we always prepare too that we have two images for every image. And one of them is the high resolution TIFF image, and one of them is a lower resolution JPEG image. And why are those so critical? Because again, one is going on web-based or other platforms. When you're doing photography for publication, especially to somebody like Arc Record, they want a very high resolution images and photography. And so you have to be kind of cognizant and prepared for those aspects. So just to give you a little bit more insight, there's that kind of project fact sheet. So it really does show our project's DNA. It's very similar to, what Philip was showing throughout their portfolio, and I'm sure he has something similar to this, but one document that basically powers everything, where it's again going to tell you the project name, location, clients, team credit, size, completion dates, then a 50 to 75 word short description and a 250 to 500 word long description is what we like to have. And we usually are tracking the awards received also on these. And when it comes down to the awards portfolios themselves, I mean, we're highly organized from that. And if you go to this top left, again, we have a whole category under our server for awards exhibits. And then in there, we go by years. And then we go by the actual type of award. So even when you look at last year's 2025 AIA Florida Design Awards, we'll have all of our submissions under there. And then we'll have the PowerPoints, the information. So we just keep a track and a kind of knowledge of this that basically allows for us to again be much more innovative and collecting of the data and the information. One of the things that I always get frustrated by, and a lot of people when I talk to them, is the templates that, it takes time to get these project portfolios organized into particular templates, but it really doesn't have to be that daunting, especially when you're well organized. And these templates, it's critical to talk about the fact that they give consistency to your project to help it stand out amongst the pack. So these templates reduce the visual noise. If you're not following the templates, that makes it very hard for jurors to fairly compare as well as follow along. And so these projects, especially when they are award worthy, will come up and rise to the top much faster if you utilize the templates that are provided to you by the organization in this specific sense. We're seeing and talking about AIA Florida here, and you see their template and how it's structured on that bottom right-hand side there. And this was just, when I'm showing DC Alexander, I just decided to show the 20 slides. I know it's really hard to see, but this is kind of, again, that almost looks monotonous following that template, but these are about telling that story, that effective story. And I think Philip, Joyce, and I all discussed. I mean, there's simple things, and I know Becky, you'll even mention this, but simple things like just putting north arrows on your plans, but having that kind of again array of hero images, drawings, details, and the experience. And we track even, most people ask like, well, we have it may look like a good batting average, but we're always tracking awards programs across the board. And so we have a Google sheet that basically looks at all the different award programs. You can even see AI Florida Design Awards 2026. We're tracking there with the published date that they published on the 10th. And then there's due dates starting, which, I think those due dates on this case is for registration. But, we're tracking all of these things across the board. So, what I just want to kind of end on, and the final point here is, I want to make this final point, that one well-prepared submission can lead to many outcomes. And so state, local awards, national recognition, publications, exhibitions, honor awards, all can draw from the same core material. And so if you stay organized and tell a clear story, opportunities don't just feel frantic, they feel manageable. And of course, it all starts with doing thoughtful, meaningful work too. But when that work is supported by clarity and care and how it is presented, opportunities do tend to find your work rather than the other way around. And so I just want to say thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions in this Q&A.
All right, thank you guys. So what is changing? I will review that part. Let me get back to my screen here. And share it would help. Okay. Presentation mode. Okay. So Joyce did review everything. I do want to let you know that the jury has been seeing this framework. This is not something new to them. Again, we do have a different jury every year. So if you have not been successful in the past, I do always advise if your project is still eligible, submit it again. We have seen projects come through more than once, and on that second time, the jury does select that project. So the jury does receive this. This is an infographic. So the 10 areas that Joyce talked about, this does have them in one place. So there's a QR code to get yourself to the infographic, but this infographic has been and will continue to be provided to the jury. So they actually had this hard copy in front of them last year when we went through deliberations. So what's changing? So you saw Jeff showed the template that he received. This year, it will have a fourth slide. It will have this. Everything else will be the same. We are not changing anything else to what you can turn in, but this is optional. We're not asking for data. I do like what Philip did with the way he graphically showed the data. We're not having a data sheet for those of you that have, or a common app data sheet that's a spreadsheet that others may have encountered working with national awards. What we're asking is that you put it in the narrative. The jury responded so positively to Philip's project that they did like how that story was told. All of these people that are here today, their projects were recipients last year because they're telling that story. Don't be afraid to use this side to the left of your template, telling that story. The words are important too. Photography is important, but the words of what your project is extremely important to make sure the jury understands what your project is and the story of your project. Most of you have been answering these questions. You are talking about the resiliency of a building, the positive impacts on the community. You are doing this. Maybe you just haven't been specifically answering the questions. So what will happen here is this will be a fourth slide within the template. Again, you do delete the slides that you're not using and set them up in what you saw from Jeff and Philip's presentations. So this will link you to the framework, and this will link you to those questions. That's the website that Joyce showed you. I do want to clarify one thing. You are allowed to have a video. You're allowed to have one video. So you still just have to meet the file size. So you can't have a huge, 15 gigabyte to upload. We do still have a file size limit. So all that will be in your instructions when you do register. But you do want to make sure that you let the jury know that they receive these. So I can't control what's going on with their volume. They receive these and look at them individually during the first round. So I do advise that you put anything in there saying like this is a video, please make sure your volume's on. Please, if there is sound to your video. All right. So what this will take you to is those links will take you to, this is just an example of one of the links that it will give you these questions that these are the questions that you can answer in the narrative of your project. And these are the same questions that are on the infographic. If you want to go ahead and print out that infographic or save it, you'll have all those questions in one place so you can answer them. So with that, awards are open. You can register now. Registration opened Friday. You have until February 9th for the early bird discounts, and then the rate goes up after that. Registration ends March 6th, and submissions are due March 16th. And the deadline for that is 11:59 p.m. Eastern, the last minute of March 16th. So it will close down if you guys are in the Panhandle on Central Time or somebody else in another office. It's going by Eastern Time that will close. We will announce our recipients in June, and then July 18th our awards. And so with that, now it's time for question and answer. And you can put questions in the Q&A. You can raise your hand and I can unmute you. There's also, we are monitoring the chat too. So any questions or any other tips or advice while people are typing things in?
While we're waiting, I think I'd just like to follow up on all the things that have been said. And just to repeat, that storytelling part of this exercise is so important. And it's what we have as architects. It's our gift to be able to design buildings, but it's also our responsibility to tell the story of how and why we designed a building the way why we did it. Traditionally, I found that architects are very bad writers, and they're better at writing through graphics, which is very important. But I don't think we have any excuse anymore about with AI available. I think those paragraphs on the left, you can put your information about what you want to say about your building, the important parts, the highlights, and actually run it through, you know, AI and let it actually write it so that it comes out English, because sometimes as architects, we aren't the best at writing. Um, and I think one thing that you really do want to focus on all the time is critically important is what is the purpose of this building? And so many times the jury will get to the project and they won't know what the building is or what is it doing and who is it serving. And so it's so important that you explain those things and then that you use the checklist that's in the design award template to ensure that you do things like Jeff mentioned putting a north arrow on, putting a scale on there. You're you have to think of the jury as they know nothing. They know nothing about your project. And so it is definitely up to you to tell that story about what this project is and why do you think it's worthy of being in the awards itself. Because at AIA Florida, I can tell you, as president, I got to be the chairman of the design awards, and I got to see everything behind the scene, 250 awards that came through, and maybe the year I was chairman, maybe 30 got awards. And it was extraordinary to me to see the quality of what is coming from various components around Florida. And the competition is stiff. I mean, it isn't easy to win an AIA Florida award. And so you got to do your best. You got to step it up and you got to bring your best to compete. I mean, you can see what Jeff and what Philip showed us today. I mean, beautiful, absolutely beautiful projects and beautifully presented and absolutely clear what they were trying to say about their buildings. So I just thought I'd throw that in.
All right. Well, we've had a couple questions come in. Any advice for design excellence integration with the Test of Time award? And the Test of Time is that building is 25 years old and still being significantly used for the same purpose. Thoughts? All right. Well,
I
while you're
would,
thinking of, okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
well, I was going to say, I think a lot of us as, well, just as human beings, we want to be successful. We don't want to show things that don't work. However, I believe in this big stretch to get better performance out of buildings, to actually align with the framework for design excellence. We just have to know what our buildings are doing. How are they having an impact on place? How are they having an impact on the visitors that are there? So what are the resource, what's the resource use? Do we know just how much energy it's using or water? Have we asked people who visited lately how they feel when they're there? And I think all of those things apply to a building that just opened or a building that's 25 years old or a building that's 50 years old. I think that when you look at it through the lens of it's not a singular building, but it's connected to a larger system, all of these questions, all of these 10 steps along the framework start to become wonderful opportunities to look at buildings and their lasting presence. Maybe even might even be easier to gather data on buildings and look at them in ways, approach them again in ways we haven't looked at. So I think that you can start to understand is it still performing the way it was intended, and if so, how does it, integration, well-being, economy, all of those, they're very broad. The words I think were very strategic. It must have taken them a long time
Yeah.
to figure out which ones to use specifically, but I think that they can become even richer in the Test of Time award submissions. Again, we're just not measuring. When we start to measure, and it takes time, right? Our contracts aren't usually aligned with that. It's something that we have to do because we find value in the work before we're on to the next one or letting it inform the next one. And I think going back 25 years later and seeing that and telling that story would be incredibly impactful, especially for a jury, but for others as well.
Okay. We do have a question. Do submissions need to meet all 10 design excellence criteria to be considered for an award? If, for example, a project needs to meet only 8, how might that affect its eligibility? This is not an eligibility criteria. Just I want to be clear about that. We are not kicking any projects out or submissions out. And it's in fact optional if you even want to answer these questions in the framework. But from being on the other side of awards for many, many juries, the more you tell the story about your project, the more it will rise to the top, as Jeff mentioned about those projects rising to the top. So please still do enter your project. Even we've had small projects and small budgets when the jury does even look at the budget, and so many comments are, we're amazed at what they did on that budget. So just because it's not a huge project with the largest budget you ever had, please submit those. And not answering it is not going to disqualify you. Only answering one as opposed to somebody else doing 10, that's not going to disqualify you either. And again, this is just in the narrative. We're not asking for, it's great if we do the testing and you have the data, but we're not asking for a spreadsheet of data. There's nothing else being asked for when you do submit it. It's within the narrative of the PowerPoint where we're asking you to answer these questions. All right, another question. Speaking of the your PowerPoint, there was a question about can the images be full bleed? We ask that you keep your images to that bigger right image or bigger right area of the template, and that you do take advantage of that text area that is on the left. That is where you will want to put your narrative and the story, whether you're answering the Framework for Design Excellence questions or not. It is very important to use the words too. Okay. For an unbuilt concept submissions or any recommendations, is it more about the design process or the design itself? In our manual, it does say that you are being evaluated on the design. So it is saying it's the focus on the process of design. Joyce being somebody that was on a jury or anybody else in about
Yeah, I
design?
mean, it's equally important in an unbuilt project to show that you are addressing those things, those topics from the beginning. So absolutely, you want to be addressing the design principles for sure.
Yeah, and there's so many techniques or ways to show that, especially these days, through modeling, like what
Yes.
Philip showed with daylighting. I mean, you could easily do that in an unbuilt project and model those. You could model a lot of these fluid dynamics. So if it's about passive ventilation strategies, if it's about how it's going to operate during flooding, and those kind of conditions, you can really have some of that proofed out through these kind of data modeling platforms that are available, and some of those, are free even online. And I know even in the schools of architecture, we're getting more and more tools like this that students are able to utilize. And so I would look at some of the young people potentially in your firms that, may have access or may have knowledge of some of these tools, especially with artificial intelligence and other things that are coming out right now that can help you model. And, and just to be clear, because to Philip's point too, the test of time, I think one of the things we have to be careful of is the quantifiable data. We also need to look at the qualifiable data, and so how does the quality of a place, I could always say, the most unsustainable building in the world, if it's been around for 25 people and it's the most used building and loved building, like for instance, the New York City Public Library, it's probably more sustainable than the most sustainable building with all the bells and whistles on the outskirts of town on a greenfield site that developed. And so I want to be very cognizant in how you qualify, your story. But to the unbuilt, I think you can just as easily, have some of these kind of proofs that tie back to the design excellence, the framework for design excellence.
And we did get a question about a recording. Yes, this will be posted, so you may watch this and share with others. It will be in Friday Facts this week, and it will be on part of the registration page. So if you do go register later, it won't be there today, but once we get this posted, it will be on the registration page. So future registrants will have access to this too. I don't see any other questions, so if anybody else has anything, please type it in or raise your hand.
Yeah, if I could just say a few more things, because never one to be short of
Please.
words. I just, I just love when Jeff shows us his filing system, because the when you're that organized and you're able to put all of that stuff together in one place and pull and use it, you can get so much bang for your buck as far as like the ability to use it in so many different, so much context, not only for doing publications or advertising, um, but it also translates to the future and for yourself, so that when you personally want to go up for awards, say honor awards, okay, any of the honor awards or fellowship. I mean, having your files in order and that ability to draw from the files makes the task so much less daunting. So, for example, I applied for the Florida Design Award in 2020. And I had recently done our website and everything was in order. And I had filed everything. I also had a practice in London for many years, for 15 years. And so all of those files were in order. And then the recent work had been put in order as well. So for me to do the design application, it wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. So that was just know how easily it is that you can go through and do these things. And then, of course, I did the design award. And then shortly afterwards, a couple of years later, I decided to go apply for the gold medal award. And between my fellowship and the design award being in order, it really made it possible for me to apply for the gold medal and have and not feel that it was going to take me months and months and months to get that work available. So
Well, Joyce, there's some kudos to you in the Q&A saying your presentation at the World Architecture Festival was excellent.
oh, that's nice. Whoever that is, thank you very much. Thank you. I did get shortlisted this year at the World Architecture Festival, and I got to present twice. And it was daunting to be on the world stage with these people that are really good. I just kept thinking, wow, this is amazing. I mean, this is an amazing opportunity. So the fact that I got to be there and present was a real honor for sure.
And to all of you, great projects and presentations. Also put in the Q&A to you. All right. I don't see anything else coming in. Any last thoughts? All right. Well, I hope. Did you have, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, no, I don't have any thoughts. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's just a matter of organization, clarity, following the templates and telling your story. And, and again, I can't press the amount of, or the importance of professional photography and professional videography of your projects.
Yeah. And that goes for getting, so I'm also on the magazine committee. And when AIA Florida requests that you submit for the magazine, this is not an iPhone opportunity for sure. Again, the competition is stiff to get invited to be published. And so you really do want to put your best foot forward when you're presenting for AIA Florida. And so Becky reminded me just before we started of the time that we had one submission where someone had taken a picture of their beautiful, gorgeous building from the car, and you could see the rear view mirror in the photograph. And it was just like, no, this building deserves so much more than your iPhone photograph that you couldn't even bother to get out of the car for and take a photograph. So please know that there's good work in Florida. There's really good design work here. And so if you want to be part of it, step it up. So we wish you all well, for sure.
Yes. So please register. Registration is now open. The sooner you register, the longer you have time with your template. And also, once you have done an award submission, submitting for our magazine is even much easier. We use a very similar template, but ask a lot less. So if you have submitted for the awards, you have a magazine submission ready to go. So I hope to see you submit for both. I will echo Joyce's comments about the level of work from architects in our area. It has impressed multiple international juries. So kudos to all of you that have been submitting and receiving awards. So please continue the great submissions. Thank you all for your time today. Thank you, Jeff, Philip, and Joyce.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Good luck,
Thank you,
everybody.
everybody.